The old county courthouse in Willow Creek had seen its share of dramaland disputes in the 1800s, Prohibition arrests in the 1920s, even a notorious bank robbery trial in the 1950s, but nothing quite like the spectacle unfolding on this chilly October morning. From the outside, the building looked almost serene, its brick facade glowing amber in the early sun, ivy clinging to the weathered stone. Inside, however, a storm of human tension gathered beneath the high-arched ceiling of Courtroom B. The heavy oak doors swung shut with a soft thud as spectators filed in, their hushed voices carrying the anxious energy of people who sensed that something significant was about to happen. The trial at the heart of all this attention involved a local business owner accused of orchestrating a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. For weeks, newspapers had printed every rumor, every scrap of evidence, until even residents who normally avoided gossip were debating the case in grocery store aisles. The accused, a middle-aged accountant named Thomas Greer, sat stiffly at the defense table, his face pale and expressionless. Across from him, the district attorney shuffled through a thick stack of papers, lips pressed tight as if each page held a weapon ready to be unsheathed. Reporters hunched over their notepads, ready to capture the slightest twitch of a witness's eyebrow. The judge, a dignified woman with silver hair, pinned neatly in a bun, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed the room with the quiet authority of someone who had presided over hundreds of cases. Her nameplate, Honorable Margaret Whitfield, glimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. She tapped her gavel once, a sharp crack that silenced the room like a sudden clap of thunder. "This court is now in session," she said, her voice steady and commanding. Among the sea of tense adults sat a young mother named Emily Carter and her 3-year-old daughter Harper. Emily had arrived early to secure a seat near the middle of the gallery, hoping the location would keep her daughter entertained without distracting the court. Emily's cousin worked in the courthouse and had convinced her to watch a portion of the trial, insisting it was a piece of local history in the making. She hadn't expected the room to feel so heavy, like a place where even breathing too loudly might draw unwanted attention. Emily smoothed the wrinkles from her navy sweater and whispered a quiet reminder to Harper to stay still. But Harper, bright-eyed and curious, was not the type to sit quietly for long. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit in one small hand and swung her legs beneath the wooden bench, her shoes barely brushing the polished floor. Her curls bounced with every tiny movement, a golden halo of energy in a room otherwise muted by grays and browns. While the adults whispered and exchanged wary glances, Harper's gaze darted around the courtroom with the restless wonder of a child discovering a new world. She stared at the judge's high bench, the glinting brass lamps, the mysterious stack of papers in front of the attorneys. But nothing captured her attention quite like the large German shepherd resting near the front. The dog's name was Rex, a seasoned canine officer with the county sheriff's department. He lay beside his handler, Deputy Mark Sloan, his posture alert but relaxed. Rex's black and tan coat gleamed under the overhead lights, his intelligent amber eyes scanning the room with a calm, almost human awareness. To most adults, Rex's presence was reassuring, an extra layer of security in a trial where emotions were running dangerously high. But to Harper, Rex was something else entirely, a magnificent, living creature who looked like he'd stepped right out of one of her storybooks. Harper tugged gently on her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Doggy." Her voice was barely audible, but Emily gave a small nod, offering a tight smile meant to convey both agreement and caution. "Yes, sweetheart, that's a police dog," she murmured. "But remember, we have to stay very quiet. He's working." Harper's eyes widened with fascination. "Working?" "Yes," Emily said, leaning close. "He's helping keep everyone safe." The idea of a dog with an important job seemed to delight Harper. She sat up straighter, clutching her rabbit as if sharing in the seriousness of Rex's duty. Every so often, the dog's ears twitched, and Harper giggled softly, covering her mouth to keep the sound from escaping. Across the courtroom, the attorneys began their arguments, their voices low but sharp, like the clash of distant swords. Witnesses were sworn in, each oath adding to the thick tension that clung to the air. Papers shuffled, pens scratched, and the occasional cough echoed like a small explosion in the quiet room. Yet despite the drama unfolding between the prosecution and defense, Harper remained captivated by Rex. The dog occasionally turned his head, his gaze sweeping the gallery as though measuring each person with silent precision. Harper imagined he was secretly looking for a friend, someone who might understand his important mission. She raised her stuffed rabbit slightly, as if introducing it from afar. Rex's ears flicked, and for a moment his eyes met hers. The tiniest wag of his tail followed, a barely perceptible motion, but enough to make Harper's heart leap with joy. Emily noticed the exchange and gently touched Harper's shoulder. "Remember, no talking," she whispered. Harper nodded solemnly, but her eyes never left the dog. Deputy Sloane watched the brief interaction with mild amusement. He had seen children mesmerized by Rex before, though few were bold enough to maintain such steady eye contact. Something about this little girl's quiet confidence caught his attention. Still, he quickly returned his focus to the proceedings. Rex, however, seemed to linger on the child, his nose twitching faintly, as though catching a scent no one else could detect. Outside, the wind rattled the courthouse windows, but inside the air felt heavy, almost electric. The prosecution called their next witness, a nervous accountant clutching a stack of ledgers. Gasps rippled through the audience as the witness described missing financial records, key evidence believed to have vanished weeks earlier. The defense attorney objected sharply, his voice echoing off the wooden walls. The judge raised a hand for silence, her gavel ready to strike. Through it all, Harper remained focused not on the adults, but on Rex. To her young mind, the trial's complicated language meant nothing, but the dog's subtle movements told a story of their own. Every shift of his paws, every flick of his ears, seemed to carry a secret message only she could see. Harper leaned closer to her mother and whispered again, "Doggy knows." Emily blinked in surprise. "Knows what, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Harper only smiled and hugged her rabbit tighter, her eyes sparkling with a certainty that made her mother shiver. No one in the room, not the attorneys, not the judge, not the officers standing guard, had any idea that the most pivotal moment of the entire trial was already in motion. It wasn't hidden in the legal arguments or the witness testimony. It sat quietly on a wooden bench halfway back in the gallery, swinging her small legs and watching a police dog with the unshakable belief that he was trying to tell her something important. And before the day was over, that belief would unravel a secret buried deeper than anyone could have imagined. The tension in Courtroom B had a way of pressing itself into every corner, seeping into the grain of the oak benches and the marble floor beneath. To the adults present, it felt heavy and almost oppressive, a tangible reminder that the future of a man's life balanced on the edge of evidence and persuasion. But to 3-year-old Harper Carter, it was simply a big, echoing room filled with strange voices, shiny brass lamps, and one very fascinating dog. Harper had been to churches, grocery stores, and the occasional doctor's office, but nothing compared to the courtroom's solemn atmosphere. The high vaulted ceiling reminded her of a castle in one of her bedtime stories. The carved wooden railings and heavy curtains seemed like pieces of a grand stage set for some mysterious play. Yet, unlike the adults who fidgeted nervously or whispered in tight, worried tones, Harper felt none of the weight of consequence. To her, the courthouse was a new world to explore with her bright eyes and boundless imagination. Emily, her mother, sat beside her, shoulders drawn tight in an effort to maintain the appearance of calm. She had brought a small tote bag of distractions coloring pages, a snack, a water bottle, but Harper's interest in her surroundings proved stronger than any toy. Every time Emily offered a crayon, Harper shook her head, eyes fixed on the world unfolding around her. It was both a relief and a source of anxiety for Emily. She was proud of her daughter's curiosity, but this was no playground. Every cough echoed, every rustle of paper drew the judge's sharp glance. The last thing she wanted was for Harper to become the center of unwanted attention. From her seat, Harper could see the defense table where Thomas Greer sat with his lawyer. His suit was neat, but slightly rumpled, as if he had ironed it himself in the dark. He looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. Harper didn't know what words like embezzlement or fraud meant, but she recognized sadness when she saw it. The man's eyes looked like a rainy day gray and heavy. She tilted her head, wondering if anyone ever gave him a stuffed animal when he was sad. But as interesting as the people were, nothing captured Harper's attention like the big German shepherd lying near the front of the room. Rex. The name tag on his harness gleamed under the lights, and Harper silently repeated the letters in her head, matching each one to the way her mother had taught her to sound out names. R-E-X. It sounded strong and important, just like the dog himself. Rex didn't act like the friendly dogs Harper sometimes saw at the park. He didn't wag his tail at strangers or beg for treats. He lay still, his gaze sweeping the room like a lighthouse beam. To Harper, it was as though Rex understood everything happening around him, every whisper, every shuffle of shoes. Occasionally, his ears flicked toward the witness stand, or his nose lifted slightly, testing scents invisible to everyone else. Harper found herself leaning forward each time he moved, eager to guess what he might be thinking. Emily noticed her daughter's fascination and offered a quiet reminder. "Remember, sweetie," she whispered, brushing a stray curl from Harper's forehead, "the doggy is working. We can look, but we can't talk to him right now." "Working?" Harper repeated softly, eyes wide. "That's right," Emily said, nodding. "He's here to help the police keep everyone safe." Harper considered this with the serious concentration of a child trying to understand a grown-up world. She thought of her father fixing cars at the auto shop and her mother typing at the kitchen table late at night. Work meant important things that helped other people. She studied Rex again, noticing the badge clipped to his harness and the polished black boots of the deputy standing beside him. The dog wasn't just sitting. He was on duty, like a soldier or a superhero. Harper hugged her stuffed rabbit closer. "He's brave," she whispered. Emily smiled faintly. "Yes, he is." While Harper admired Rex, the trial unfolded like a slow-moving storm. The district attorney questioned witnesses with sharp precision, building a case around missing financial ledger records that were supposed to prove Greer had hidden money in secret accounts. Each new statement drew quiet murmurs from the gallery. The defense attorney objected, the judge overruled, and the jury scribbled notes on yellow pads. To the adults, every sentence carried weight, each piece of evidence a potential turning point. To Harper, the words were like a distant radio broadcast, full of unfamiliar sounds and no clear meaning. She watched the people instead. The woman on the witness stand wrung her hands, her eyes darting nervously. The man in the blue suit kept tapping his pen against the table. Even the judge, who looked as steady as a mountain, sometimes pursed her lips when the lawyers argued too long. Harper didn't understand the story they were telling, but she sensed the emotions beneath it. Worry, frustration, fear. Her young mind absorbed the atmosphere like a sponge, even if she couldn't name what she felt. Every so often, her attention drifted back to Rex. The dog remained patient and still. But Harper noticed subtle changes, the way his ears pricked when a new piece of evidence was mentioned. the faint twitch of his nose as if sniffing something hidden. At one point, Rex shifted his weight and glanced toward the jury box, holding the gaze for a heartbeat too long. Harper followed his eyes and then looked back at him, her small brow furrowing. Was he trying to tell someone something? Deputy Mark Sloan, Rex's handler, stood with professional calm, but he, too, was aware of the dog's subtle movements. Years of training had taught him to trust Rex's instincts. The German Shepherd had helped uncover narcotics, track missing persons, and detect hidden evidence countless times. If Rex was reacting to something, Sloan would take note. For now, though, there was no visible threat, only the faint but unmistakable tension of a courtroom where secrets waited to be revealed. Harper leaned close to her mother, her voice barely above a whisper. "Doggy knows." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Knows what, sweetheart?" Harper didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained fixed on Rex, who now sat a little straighter, his head tilted slightly toward the jury box. Finally, she gave a tiny shrug and said, "Just knows." Emily frowned softly. Children said strange things all the time, but there was something unsettling about Harper's certainty. Before she could ask more, the judge called for a brief recess. The sound of the gavel cracked through the room like a breaking branch. Lawyers gathered papers, jurors stretched their legs, and the hum of conversation filled the air. The sudden break only deepened Harper's focus on Rex. As people rose and moved about, the dog remained perfectly still, his amber eyes locked on a spot near the witness stand. Harper followed his gaze again, feeling a strange flutter in her chest, like the moment before a surprise. She didn't know why, but she felt sure the dog was waiting for her, or for something only the two of them could sense. Emily offered her daughter a snack, hoping to distract her. "Would you like some crackers, Harper?" Harper shook her head without looking away from Rex. "No, he's talking." Emily blinked. "Sweetheart, dogs don't?" "He's talking," Harper repeated firmly, squeezing her rabbit. Her small voice carried a quiet conviction that made Emily pause. Around them, adults resumed their quiet conversations, unaware that a silent exchange was taking place between a watchful police dog and a 3-year-old girl. Neither Rex nor Harper moved, their eyes locked as if sharing a secret no one else in the courtroom could hear. The 15-minute recess gave the courtroom a chance to breathe, but even in pause, the atmosphere hummed with a kind of invisible charge. Lawyers retreated to corners with hurried whispers, jurors stretched stiff legs, and reporters rushed to the hallway to dictate updates into their recorders. The smell of polished wood mixed with the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the break room. Yet despite the brief relaxation, there was no mistaking the tension that clung to the air like static. For many inside Courtroom B, the trial was a chess match inching toward its climax. For 3-year-old Harper Carter, however, the room had transformed into something far more magical. As adults shuffled papers and exchanged quick comments, Harper remained rooted to her bench, her stuffed rabbit perched on her lap like a tiny companion. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, stayed fixed on the German Shepherd at the front of the room. Rex had not left his post beside Deputy Sloan. Even as people milled about, the dog sat alert, his gaze steady, as though he were listening to something only he could hear. His ears flicked now and then, catching sounds too subtle for human ears, but his focus never wavered from a spot near the jury box. Emily Carter noticed her daughter's stillness. "Do you want to stretch, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "Maybe a little walk in the hall?" Harper shook her head without looking away from Rex. "No, Doggy's busy." Emily followed her daughter's gaze. To her, the dog looked calm and composed, nothing more. But Harper's small body vibrated with the kind of quiet anticipation a child feels when she senses a secret about to be revealed. Emily gave a small sigh and sat back, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She told herself it was just a child's imagination. Still, something about the unwavering connection between the dog and her daughter made the hairs on her neck prickle. Across the room, Deputy Mark Sloan noticed it too. Years of working with Rex had trained him to recognize even the smallest shift in the dog's behavior. Rex wasn't restless exactly, but there was an intensity to his posture that Mark had learned to respect. The dog's eyes lingered on the jury box longer than usual. His nose twitched, drawing in scents from the wood paneling and the seams between floorboards. Mark made a mental note to run a sweep later, just to be safe. When the recess ended, the judge re-entered the courtroom with her characteristic poise, her black robe billowing slightly as she took her seat. The gavel cracked sharply, commanding attention. "Court is now back in session," she announced. The buzz of conversation died instantly, replaced by the crisp shuffle of papers as attorneys prepared to resume. The district attorney stood, ready to call the next witness, when an unexpected movement drew every eye in the room. Rex had risen to his feet. It was a subtle motion at first, a slow, deliberate stand, his paws making no sound on the polished floor. His amber eyes swept the gallery, scanning faces before settling once more on the jury box. Deputy Sloan tightened his grip on the leash, instantly alert. The dog wasn't showing aggression, but he was focused, intent. Something had caught his attention. Harper leaned forward, her small fingers gripping the edge of the bench. She felt the moment like a ripple through the air, a silent message passing from Rex to her. Without hesitation, she slipped off the bench and stood. Emily reacted instantly, reaching for her daughter's hand, but Harper was already pointing. Her tiny finger extended toward Rex, unwavering. In a clear, high voice that carried across the silent courtroom, she spoke two simple words, "Box there." The words floated through the air like a bell ringing across an empty field. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The judge froze, gavel in hand. The district attorney lowered a stack of papers, his brow furrowed in confusion. Even Rex seemed to pause, his ears flicking at the sound of the child's voice. Emily's heart jolted. "Harper," she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and embarrassment. She pulled her daughter gently back to the bench. "Sweetheart, you can't." But Harper's eyes never left the dog. Her voice, small but sure, repeated the phrase. "Box there." Deputy Sloan's pulse quickened. He followed the direction of Harper's finger and saw that Rex had turned his head slightly toward the same spot, the far corner of the jury box, where a decorative wooden panel met the floor. The dog's nose twitched again, nostrils flaring as if catching a hidden scent. Sloan felt the familiar tingle of recognition. This wasn't coincidence. Rex was working. "Easy, boy," Sloan murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He loosened the leash just enough to give Rex room to move. The dog stepped forward, muscles taut, ears pricked. A hush fell over the courtroom, broken only by the faint click of Rex's claws on the wood. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Deputy Sloan," she said cautiously, "is there an issue?" Sloan hesitated. "Your Honor, I'm not certain. My K9 is indicating interest in the jury box. I'd like permission to investigate." The judge exchanged a glance with the bailiff, then nodded slowly. "Proceed with care." Sloan gave a quick hand signal. Rex moved closer to the corner of the jury box, nose pressed to the seam where the panel met the floor. His body stiffened, tail straight, the unmistakable posture of a dog detecting something hidden. The spectators leaned forward, their collective breath held in suspense. Harper watched with wide eyes, her small chest rising and falling with excitement. She clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, as if sharing the moment with her silent companion. "Box there," she whispered again, her voice now a soft echo of certainty. Emily felt a strange chill creep through her as she held her daughter close. How could Harper know anything about what Rex was sensing? The child had never been in this courtroom before. She couldn't possibly understand the stakes of the trial or the meaning of her own words. And yet, somehow, she had spoken the very phrase that matched Rex's silent signal. Deputy Sloan knelt beside the jury box, running his fingers along the base of the wooden paneling. He felt a faint ridge, something that didn't quite belong. Using a pocket tool, he pried gently at the edge. The panel gave a soft click and loosened slightly. A collective gasp rippled through the room as the wood shifted to reveal a narrow gap just wide enough for a small object. Inside, wedged between the support beams, was a cardboard box wrapped tightly in packing tape. The silence that followed was deafening. "Your Honor," Sloan said, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline, "we've located an unmarked container concealed within the jury box." The judge's eyes widened. "Bailiff, secure that area at once." Officers moved quickly, surrounding the corner as Sloan carefully removed the box. It was surprisingly heavy for its size. He set it on a nearby table, his gloved hands testing the weight. The tape was old but intact, the cardboard slightly warped from age. Written faintly across the top in smudged black marker were the faded letters. Evidence Ledger 3. Gasps and murmurs swept through the gallery. The district attorney stood frozen, his face a mask of shock. The defense attorney's eyes widened, then narrowed with sudden calculation. Reporters scrambled for their notebooks, pens scratching frantically. Through it all, Harper sat quietly on the bench, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. To her, it felt like a game, like discovering a hidden treasure in one of her storybooks. She hugged her rabbit tightly, her small body vibrating with excitement. Emily could only stare at her daughter, her mind racing. How had Harper known? What had compelled her to point, to speak those exact words? She thought back to the moments before the recess, to the way Rex had locked eyes with Harper, as though sharing a silent understanding. A shiver ran down her spine. Deputy Sloan turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this box needs to be logged and examined immediately. It could contain evidence relevant to this case." The judge nodded, her voice sharp with authority. "Proceed. And seal the courtroom until we know what we're dealing with." As officers carried the box away for inspection, all eyes turned once more to the small child who had spoken the words that set the discovery in motion. Harper simply looked back at them, her face open and innocent, as if she had merely pointed out something obvious, like a bird outside a window, or a toy hidden under a couch. No one could explain it. Not the lawyers, not the judge, not even Deputy Sloan, who knew Rex better than anyone. But one thing was undeniable. The course of the trial had just changed forever, thanks to a 3-year-old girl and the police dog who seemed to understand her better than anyone else in the room. The discovery of the taped cardboard box turned the courtroom into a hive of whispers and sharp, nervous glances. Moments earlier, the trial had been following a predictable rhythm: witnesses, objections, carefully rehearsed arguments. Now, it felt as if the floor itself had tilted beneath everyone's feet. What had begun as a methodical legal proceeding had suddenly become a living mystery. Deputy Mark Sloan crouched near the evidence table, his gloved hands still resting on the box that 3-year-old Harper Carter had inexplicably pointed out. Rex sat beside him, tail stiff, posture alert but calm. The German shepherd's amber eyes never left the cardboard container, as if he already knew exactly what it contained. Judge Margaret Whitfield tapped her gavel once, the sharp crack slicing through the tense silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said firmly, "this court will maintain order. Bailiff, secure the gallery. No one leaves until we determine the contents of this box." The bailiff nodded and moved swiftly to lock the courtroom doors. The heavy, Click of the deadbolt echoed like a gunshot, making several spectators jump. Emily Carter tightened her grip around Harper's small shoulders. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as she tried to process what had just unfolded. Her daughter had pointed to an unseen space inside the jury box, spoken 2 words. There, and moments later, a police dog had led officers straight to a hidden piece of evidence. Emily searched for some rational explanation, but none came. Harper was only 3. She couldn't possibly understand the concept of concealed evidence or trial strategy. And yet she had been certain. Across the room, the attorneys were equally stunned. The defense lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Victor Lang, stood with his arms crossed, his face an unreadable mask. But Emily noticed the faint flicker of something like hope in his eyes. If the box contained the missing ledgers, rumored to prove Thomas Greer's innocence, this discovery could unravel the prosecution's entire case. The district attorney, meanwhile, wore a look of dawning panic. He leaned toward his assistant, whispering urgently. Papers were shuffled, notes exchanged. Whatever lay inside that box threatened to append months of carefully prepared arguments. Judge Whitfield gestured to Deputy Sloan. "Deputy, you may open the box in the presence of the court. Proceed with caution." Sloan nodded and retrieved a small utility knife from his belt. The gallery collectively held its breath as the blade sliced through the brittle packing tape. Each sound the rip of adhesive, the faint creak of cardboard, seemed amplified in the charged silence. Harper leaned forward slightly, eyes bright with childlike anticipation, as if she were watching a magician reveal the final trick. The top flaps gave way, and Sloan carefully peeled them back. Inside, beneath a layer of crumpled paper, lay several thick binders filled with neatly organized documents. Their edges were yellowed with age, but the labels on the spines were still legible. Ledger A, Ledger B, Ledger C. A faint gasp swept through the courtroom. The district attorney paled. He recognized those ledgers instantly. They were the missing financial records that auditors had claimed were destroyed. Without them, the state's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. With them, the entire narrative could change. Judge Whitfield's voice remained steady, though her eyes betrayed her surprise. "Deputy Sloan, please secure those binders for immediate examination by the court clerk. Counsel will have the opportunity to review their contents shortly." Sloan carefully lifted the binders, placing them on the evidence table one by one. Rex sat motionless, his job done for now, though his eyes followed every movement as if guarding a treasure. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, their faces lit with the thrill of a story that had just taken a sensational turn. Camera phones, though officially prohibited, appeared discreetly in the gallery as spectators tried to capture the moment. The buzz of whispered speculation grew louder, despite the judge's repeated calls for order. Emily felt the weight of the room pressing in. She looked down at Harper, who seemed entirely at ease, her small legs swinging gently from the bench. Harper's stuffed rabbit rested on her lap, its button eyes reflecting the overhead lights. Emily bent low and whispered, "Sweetheart, how did you know?" Harper turned to her mother and gave a simple, almost mischievous smile. "Rex told me," she said softly, as if that explanation should be enough. Emily blinked. "Rex, the dog?" Harper nodded with the calm certainty of a child, describing something obvious. "He said box there, so I said it too." Emily's stomach tightened. Harper's words were delivered without hesitation, without the playful exaggeration of a make-believe game. But dogs don't talk. Emily opened her mouth to press further, but stopped when she caught the judge's sharp glance. Now was not the time for questions. At the defense table, Victor Lang leaned toward his client, Thomas Greer. "If these ledgers are what I think they are," Lang murmured, "this could clear you before the jury even deliberates." Greer's eyes widened. For weeks, he had maintained his innocence insisting that key financial records would exonerate him. No one had believed him, not even some members of his own family. And yet here they were, hidden inside the very room where his fate would be decided. The district attorney rose suddenly. "Your Honor," he began, his voice tight, "the chain of custody regarding these documents is unclear. We must question their authenticity before they are entered into evidence." Lang shot to his feet. "Authenticity can be verified. The location alone proves concealment. Someone in this courthouse hid these ledgers, likely to manipulate the outcome of this trial." The judge rapped her gavel sharply. "Gentlemen, enough. The court will review the documents under controlled conditions. For now, this trial is in recess until further notice." The gavel struck again, releasing a murmur of relieved breaths. Jurors filed out under escort, their faces a mix of confusion and curiosity. Attorneys gathered their papers with stiff, hurried motions. Officers maintained a careful watch as Deputy Sloan carried the box toward a secure evidence room. Rex trotted. Beside him, head high, as if aware of the significance of his find. Emily held Harper close as the gallery slowly emptied. Reporters crowded near the doors, their voices rising in a frenzy of speculation. But Harper remained serene, as though none of the commotion belonged to her. She traced small circles on her rabbit's worn ear and hummed a quiet tune. Emily tried again, her voice trembling. "Harper, sweetie, dogs can't really talk. How did you hear him?" Harper tilted her head, considering the question. "He didn't use words like us," she said finally. "He just said it. Here." She tapped her chest lightly, right over her heart. "I just knew." Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to dismiss the explanation as a child's imagination, but the sequence of events refused to be ignored. Rex had looked at Harper. Harper had spoken. And now a hidden box of evidence sat on the court's evidence table, threatening to rewrite the entire case. Deputy Sloan returned briefly to collect Rex's leash. As he passed Emily, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "Your daughter," he said quietly. "She's something special." Emily managed a faint smile. "She certainly is." Sloan crouched to Harper's level, offering a warm but curious look. "Rex likes you," he said. "That's rare. He doesn't usually warm up to strangers, especially in a courtroom." Harper giggled softly and reached out to pat the dog's head. Rex lowered his ears slightly, leaning into the gentle touch. Sloan watched the exchange with an expression halfway between wonder and puzzlement. As the last of the spectators drifted out and officers secured the room, Emily felt a strange combination of relief and unease. Something extraordinary had just happened, something no one could fully explain. And though the courtroom was emptying, the story was far from over. The ledgers would be examined. Questions would be asked. Allegiances would shift. But Emily knew, as she held her daughter close, that no amount of legal analysis could explain the quiet certainty with which a 3-year-old girl had revealed a secret, buried beneath layers of lies and oak paneling. Harper had simply listened to a dog, to a feeling, to something beyond words, and the entire trial now balanced on the truth she had brought into the light. The courtroom remained officially in recess, but the courthouse itself felt anything but restful. Deputy Mark Sloan carried the box of ledgers to a secured evidence chamber 2 floors below the main courtroom. Accompanied by 2 other deputies and the ever-alert Rex, the dog's nails clicked against the polished linoleum, a steady percussion that seemed to mirror the racing thoughts of everyone involved. Inside the evidence chamber, Judge Whitfield had authorized an immediate, tightly controlled inspection. 2 clerks, sworn to absolute confidentiality, waited behind a steel table. Each wore latex gloves and expressions of grave anticipation. The ledgers, now dusted for prints and photographed, rested in neat stacks, their faded bindings and yellowing pages allaying the storm of controversy they were about to unleash. Deputy Sloan set the box down with deliberate care. "Chain of custody begins now," he said, his voice formal but taut. Initials and timestamp on every page scanned. No exceptions. His eyes swept the room, silently challenging anyone to cut corners. Everyone nodded. Upstairs, the corridors buzzed with restless energy. Reporters huddled near vending machines, trading half-formed theories. Was the box planted by the defense? Hidden by a rogue staffer? Or worse, concealed by someone inside the prosecution's own team? Each hypothesis grew wilder than the last, and still no one could explain how a 3-year-old child had known where to point. Emily Carter sat on a bench just outside the evidence chamber, Harper curled against her side. The little girl swung her stuffed rabbit idly and hummed a nursery rhyme, seemingly untouched by the tension thickening the air. Emily studied her daughter's serene profile, trying to reconcile this peaceful child with the near supernatural certainty she displayed only an hour earlier. "Rex told me," Harper had said. Emily's rational mind kept circling the phrase like a restless bird. Dogs didn't talk, but then again, dogs didn't typically solve courtroom mysteries either. A low chime announced the arrival of Victor Lang, the defense attorney. He moved briskly, a lean silhouette of dark suit and sharpened purpose. Behind him trailed Thomas Greer, flanked by a deputy. Though still technically in custody, Greer's posture had shifted from anxious to almost buoyant. This, Lang knew, might be the break that saved his client's life. Judge Whitfield soon followed, robes swishing softly as she entered the chamber. Her expression remained stern, but a glint of curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Proceed," she instructed. The first ledger was opened beneath a bright inspection lamp. Its pages, though aged, were meticulously organized. Columns of dates, payment entries, and coded notations that only a trained accountant could immediately decipher. Clerk Ramirez flipped carefully, stopping when a series of irregular withdrawals caught her eye. "These amounts," she murmured, "match the discrepancies the prosecution claimed were missing from Greer's company accounts." Lang leaned in, eyes narrowing. "And the signatures?" Ramirez adjusted her glasses. "They're not Mr. Greer's. Different handwriting entirely repeated across multiple months." A hush settled as the implication crystallized. If the signatures weren't Greer's, someone else had authorized the suspicious transfers that formed the backbone of the state's fraud charges. The ledgers weren't merely helpful, they were exculpatory. Judge Whitfield exhaled slowly. "This material will require forensic authentication," she said, though her tone carried an undercurrent of inevitability. "But if verified, it substantially alters the evidentiary landscape." Victor Lang allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "Your Honor, I respectfully request an emergency hearing to present these findings to the jury." Before the judge could respond, a sharp rap sounded at the door. Deputy Reynolds entered, face pale. "Judge, we have a situation," he said. "There's a credible report that someone attempted to access the sealed evidence closet upstairs. No entry was gained, but the lock was tampered with." Gasps rippled through the room. Judge Whitfield's eyes hardened. "Secure every exit. No one leaves this building without clearance." The revelation added a dangerous edge to the mystery. Someone somewhere was desperate to keep those ledgers from the light of day. Emily instinctively drew Harper closer, her mother's instincts prickling with unease. If someone was willing to break into an evidence closet, what else might they attempt? Down on the floor, Rex gave a sudden low growl, ears pricking toward the hallway. Deputy Sloan followed the dog's gaze and stepped to the door. "Stay alert," he ordered the other deputies. The German shepherd's hackles rose for a tense moment before slowly settling, but the warning was unmistakable. Danger lurked nearby, even if unseen. Meanwhile, Clerk Ramirez uncovered a second revelation Inside ledger C, Judge, she said, voice tight with excitement. These entries list payment transfers to an account under the name J. Halverson, cross-checking with bank subpoenas we already have. That name matches one of the prosecution's key witnesses. Victor Lang's eyes gleamed. If these records hold, Your Honor, it suggests that the state's own witness was funneling company funds while pointing the finger at my client. Judge Whitfield's jaw tightened. Continue documenting. This court will not tolerate tampering from any side. The room fell into a tense rhythm of scanning, photographing, and cross-referencing. Each new page deepened the narrative. Secret transfers, falsified invoices, and signatures belonging to individuals far removed from Thomas Greer. The prosecution's carefully constructed case was unraveling one line item at a time. Outside the chamber, the courthouse felt like a kettle approaching boil. Reporters clamored for updates. Jurors whispered anxiously in their sequestered room, and staffers exchanged furtive glances as rumors leapt from ear to ear. The story of the mystery box had already leaked to social media despite strict no-phone rules. Within minutes, #BoxThere began trending nationwide, fueled by speculation about the toddler who had triggered the discovery. Emily tried to shield Harper from the commotion, but even a 3-year-old could sense the building excitement. Harper peeked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Mommy, did Rex find the truth?" Emily stroked her daughter's hair, unsure how to answer. "Maybe he did, sweetheart. Maybe he did." Deputy Sloan reappeared, his expression more serious than before. "Judge, we've secured all exits," he reported. "But I recommend moving the ledgers to an off-site facility before nightfall. If someone's already tried to breach the evidence closet, we can't risk a second attempt." Whitfield considered, then nodded. "Agreed, Deputy. Coordinate with federal marshals for immediate transfer." Victor Lang seized the moment. "Your Honor, while security is arranged, may the defense obtain certified copies? This information is too critical to delay." The judge hesitated only a beat. "Copies may be made under supervision. Counsel for both sides will receive identical sets to preserve balance." As deputies moved to implement the order, Rex settled at Harper's feet, his head resting lightly against her shoes. The dog's calm presence contrasted sharply with the storm of activity around them. Emily watched in silent wonder as Harper bent down, whispering something inaudible into Rex's ear. The dog gave a soft chuff, almost like an acknowledgement. For all the grown-ups' frantic maneuvering, it was impossible to ignore the quiet partnership that had sparked the discovery. A child's innocent trust, a dog's unwavering instincts, together they had unearthed what seasoned investigators had failed to find. By late afternoon, certified digital scans of every ledger page were complete, encrypted, and distributed to both legal teams. Federal marshals escorted the physical binders to a secured vault in a neighboring city, their convoy departing under heavy guard. Judge Whitfield issued a final directive before adjourning for the day. Court will reconvene tomorrow morning. Counsel should prepare to address the admissibility and implications of these documents. Until then, all parties are ordered not to discuss the contents publicly. This court will protect the integrity of the process. As officials dispersed, Emily finally exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The ledgers were safe for now, but the questions swirling in her mind were anything but settled. Who had hidden the box? Who had tried to retrieve it? And how, in a world governed by logic and law, had a 3-year-old girl and a police dog managed to pierce the deception that had ensnared so many? Harper squeezed her mother's hand and looked up with a sleepy but satisfied smile. "Rex is a good talker," she whispered, as if sharing a secret too big for grown-ups to understand. Emily hugged her daughter close, her heart full of gratitude and a trace of awe. Whatever force had guided Harper's quiet certainty, it had brought the truth into the light. And tomorrow, when the courtroom reconvened, that truth would shake the entire case to its core. Morning light slanted through the tall windows of the county courthouse, spilling across the marble floors in thin golden stripes. The air smelled faintly of polish and tension. By the time the security checkpoints opened, a restless crowd had already formed outside. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like impatient fingers. The story of the mystery box had spread overnight, and now the entire nation seemed to be watching a small Midwestern courtroom. Inside, Judge Margaret Whitfield arrived earlier than usual, robes flowing as she strode to chambers. She carried herself with the measured calm of someone accustomed to high-stakes hearings, but even she could feel the electric anticipation humming through the walls. Today, the ledgers discovered in the hidden box would be formally introduced, and with them, the very foundation of the state's case might crumble. Deputy Mark Sloan stood near the bench, Rex seated at his side. The German shepherd sat as if carved from stone, ears forward, eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. Though trained to detect explosives and narcotics, Rex seemed aware that his role today was more symbolic. He was the living emblem of the break in the case, a dog whose instincts, paired with a child's innocent declaration, had brought long-buried truths into daylight. Emily Carter entered the gallery with Harper in her arms. The little girl clutched her well-worn rabbit and offered a sleepy smile to Rex, who gave a subtle wag of his tail in acknowledgement. Emily felt the ripple of attention as spectators turned to look at them. Overnight, Harper had become a reluctant celebrity. Though reporters shouted questions the moment they stepped outside the car. "Harper, did the dog talk to you?" Emily had shielded her daughter behind a wall of silence. The less attention Harper received, the safer she would be. Victor Lang, the defense attorney, arrived next, carrying a slim briefcase and the air of a man who finally held the winning cards. He exchanged a brief nod with Emily, his expression unreadable but undeniably confident. Behind him walked Thomas Greer, the accused businessman whose future hinged on the day's proceedings. Greer's face bore the cautious relief of a man who dared to hope but had not yet been freed. The prosecution entered moments later, their shoulders squared but eyes wary. Assistant District Attorney Melissa Kearney clutched a stack of hastily prepared motions. She had spent the night searching for any legal angle to blunt the impact of the ledger's chain of custody, admissibility, even the possibility of planted evidence, but the sheer authenticity of the documents left few viable attacks. At precisely 9 o'clock, Judge Whitfield rapped her gavel. "This court will come to order. We reconvene in the matter of State of Illinois v. Thomas Greer." Her gaze swept the packed gallery, lingering briefly on Emily and Harper before settling on the attorneys. "Counsel, I understand there are developments to address before we resume witness testimony." Victor Lang rose first. "Your Honor, the defense moves to admit into evidence the financial ledgers recovered yesterday from within this very courtroom. These documents, authenticated by independent forensic examiners, overnight demonstrate a pattern of embezzlement perpetrated not by my client, but by another party." A ripple of murmurs surged through the gallery. Judge Whitfield raised a hand for silence and turned to the prosecution. "Miss Kearney, your response?" Kearney stood, her voice firm but strained. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge the existence of these documents, we must object to their immediate admission. The circumstances of their discovery raise serious questions. A 3-year-old child and a police K-9 cannot constitute a reliable chain of custody. Furthermore, we cannot rule out the possibility of defense tampering." Lang's eyes flashed. The dog's alert and the child's statement merely directed deputies to the location. The evidence itself was sealed and catalogued under strict supervision. The chain of custody began the moment Deputy Sloan removed the box from the floor. "Independent examiners have verified both the paper's age and the ink's consistency with the time frame of the alleged crimes. The state's suggestion of tampering is both speculative and desperate. The judge's gavel struck once. Enough. This court has reviewed preliminary forensic reports. The ledgers meet the threshold for authenticity. The defense's motion to admit is granted. The words landed like a thunderclap. Reporters scrambled to relay the ruling, their fingers flying across keyboards. Spectators leaned forward as clerks wheeled in a cart stacked with carefully labeled binders, each containing copies of the explosive documents. Victor Lang wasted no time. He summoned his first witness, forensic accountant Dr. Lena Marcus, a poised woman with sharp eyes and a stack of spreadsheets. Under Lang's questioning, Dr. Marcus detailed how the ledgers revealed a web of hidden accounts and unauthorized withdrawals, each tied not to Thomas Greer, but to a man named Jonathan Halverson, the state's star witness. Dr. Marcus, Lang said, pacing slowly, based on your review, could these transactions have been executed by Mr. Greer without leaving any trace of his authorization? No, Marcus replied firmly. The signatures, account codes, and approval stamps all point to Mr. Halverson. Financial pattern indicates a deliberate effort to implicate Mr. Greer while diverting funds for personal gain. A shocked murmur rippled through the gallery. Harper clapped her small hands once, apparently delighted by the sound of grown-ups gasping. Emily quickly hushed her, though a faint smile tugged at her lips. Kearney attempted to counter, suggesting that Greer could have coerced Halverson or manipulated internal records. But under cross-examination, Dr. Marcus dismantled each theory with calm precision. By the time she stepped down, the prosecution's case looked as fragile as a sandcastle at high tide. Next, Deputy Sloan took the stand to recount the discovery itself. He described how Rex had shown sudden interest near the jury box and how Harper Carter's innocent 2 words, "box there," had prompted a second search. Kearney seized on this detail during cross-examination. Deputy, are you suggesting that a toddler's intuition is now a recognized investigative technique? Sloane's expression remained steady. Ma'am, I don't speculate on intuition. I follow my training. The dog alerted. The child pointed. We investigated. The evidence speaks for itself. A quiet chuckle rippled through the spectators, quickly stifled by the judge's gavel. As testimony continued, it became increasingly clear that the prosecution's case was unraveling. Jurors exchanged meaningful glances, their skepticism of the state's narrative growing with each revelation. Even the judge's measured expressions hinted at a shifting tide. During a mid-morning recess, Emily carried Harper to a quiet corner near the water fountain. You're being so patient, she whispered, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. Harper smiled dreamily. Rex is happy, she said. He likes when people find the truth. Emily felt a shiver despite the warm air. Her daughter's words, so simple and certain, carried a weight far beyond her years. When the court reconvened, Victor Lang delivered a closing statement that seemed to slice through the room like a scalpel. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, his voice steady and resonant, justice is not a guessing game. Yesterday, an innocent child and a loyal dog uncovered what an entire investigative team failed to find. Today, you have seen with your own eyes the proof that Thomas Greer was framed. The question is not whether he is guilty. The question is how long the true culprit has deceived us all. The judge recessed for lunch, leaving the jury to digest the morning's revelations. As spectators filed out, reporters rushed to broadcast updates. Emily held Harper close, aware that they stood at the center of a story larger than themselves. Deputy Sloan approached quietly, Rex trotting beside him. Looks like this trial's taking a turn, he said with a faint smile. Emily managed a soft laugh. Thanks to you and to him. She nodded toward Rex, Sloane glanced down at Harper. And maybe thanks to someone else, too. Harper beamed and reached out to pat Rex's head. The dog leaned into her tiny hand, eyes warm and trusting. In that moment, Emily realized that no matter what the verdict would be, the truth had already begun to surface, and it had started with a child's innocent heart and a dog's unwavering instincts. The afternoon session promised fireworks. The recall of Jonathan Halverson for cross-examination, the potential collapse of the prosecution's narrative, and perhaps the first glimpse of real justice. But for Emily, standing in the hushed hallway with Harper's small hand clasped in hers, one thought echoed louder than all the legal arguments combined. Sometimes, it takes the purest voices to reveal the deepest truths. The afternoon session began with a tension so thick it felt almost physical, pressing against the ribs of everyone present. The jury filed back into their box, faces drawn and alert. Reporters leaned forward, ready to transmit every word to a world now captivated by the tale of a hidden box, a fearless dog, and a child's inexplicable intuition. The hum of whispered speculation died the instant Judge Margaret Whitfield stepped through the side door and mounted the bench. "Court is now in session," she declared, her voice firm but edged with the gravity of the moment. "The defense may proceed with the recall of Jonathan Halverson." A low ripple of anticipation moved through the gallery as the door to the witness chamber opened. Jonathan Halverson entered slowly, his carefully tailored suit unable to hide the slight stiffness in his movements. Once considered the prosecution's star witness, the man whose testimony had framed Thomas Greer as the mastermind of a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, Halverson now walked like someone stepping onto thin ice. Victor Lang rose with deliberate calm, his expression revealing nothing of the strategy he had honed through a sleepless night. "Mr. Halverson," Lang began once Halverson was sworn in, "yesterday you testified that Thomas Greer diverted company funds to offshore accounts for personal gain. Do you stand by that testimony today?" Halverson cleared his throat. "Yes," he said, though the word emerged softer than it had the day before. Lang approached the witness stand with a folder in hand. "Then perhaps you can help the court understand why these financial ledgers," he tapped the thick binder resting on the evidence table, "show repeated transfers of those same funds into accounts registered under your name." The words landed like a hammer strike. A collective gasp surged through the courtroom, followed by the frantic clatter of reporters' keyboards. Halverson blinked rapidly. I have no knowledge of those transfers," he stammered. "Those documents must be falsified." Lang raised an eyebrow. "Falsified?" "Our independent forensic examiner confirmed the ink and paper date to the precise time of the alleged thefts. The signatures match yours exactly. Would you care to explain how such convincing forgeries came to exist hidden beneath the very floor where you testified against my client?" The gallery erupted in murmurs. Judge Whitfield's gavel cracked against the wood. "Order! Order in this court!" Halverson shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening as he attempted to regain composure. "Anyone could have forged my signature," he said weakly. Lang's voice sharpened. "Anyone?" "Including the handwriting analysts who have already confirmed these entries as yours beyond statistical doubt? Including the banking security systems that logged your personal ID at each transaction? Mr. Halverson, the ledgers show a pattern of embezzlement benefiting you and implicating my client as a scapegoat. Did you, or did you not, authorize these transfers?" Halverson's eyes darted toward the prosecution table. Assistant District Attorney Melissa Kearney sat frozen, her pen motionless above her notepad. The unspoken message in her expression was unmistakable. "You are on your own." Beads of sweat gathered at Halverson's temples. I want to speak with my attorney," he muttered. Lang turned to the judge. "Your Honor, The witness is evading direct questioning. I request that he be compelled to answer. Judge Whitfield leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Mr. Halverson, you are under oath. You will answer the question or face contempt of court. The silence that followed was electric. All eyes fixed on Halverson as he gripped the edges of the witness stand, knuckles white. Finally, his shoulders sagged under the invisible weight pressing down on him. I authorized some of the transfers, he whispered. The room exploded with noise gasps, shouts, the frantic rustle of reporters scrambling to capture the confession. The judge's gavel pounded repeatedly, but the revelation had already detonated like a bomb. Lang seized the moment. Some of the transfers? How many, Mr. Halverson? Enough to frame my client for crimes he did not commit. Halverson's voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The company was bleeding money. I thought if I shifted some funds, no one would notice. Then the audit started, and I panicked. I needed a diversion. And so you pointed the finger at Thomas Greer, Lang said, his voice like a scalpel. An innocent man. Halverson's eyes fell to the floor. Yes, he croaked. Gasps cascaded across the courtroom like a wave. Jurors exchanged shocked glances. One even covered her mouth with her hand. Emily Carter felt Harper stir against her side and instinctively tightened her embrace. Harper looked up at her mother with wide, curious eyes and whispered, "The bad man told a lie." Emily nodded, her throat too tight to answer. Lang turned to the jury, his voice steady but laced with righteous indignation. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard the truth from the very man the state relied upon to build their case. He embezzled the funds. He framed my client. And if not for the extraordinary discovery of those ledgers brought to light by nothing more than a child's innocent observation and a dog's honoring instinct, Thomas Greer might have been condemned for crimes he did not commit. Judge Whitfield addressed the prosecution. Ms. Kearney, given this admission, does the state wish to continue its case? Kearney stood slowly, her face pale but composed. Your Honor, in light of these revelations, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Thomas Greer and requests that Mr. Halverson be remanded into custody pending new charges. The judge nodded gravely. So ordered. She turned to Halverson, who sat slumped in defeat. Mr. Halverson, you are hereby placed under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and perjury. Bailiff, take him into custody. The bailiff moved forward as Halverson's shoulders sagged further. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the hushed chamber like punctuation to a hard-earned truth. Thomas Greer exhaled a trembling breath, his eyes glistening as he turned toward Victor Lang. The attorney offered a brief, reassuring nod before stepping back to the defense table. The courtroom erupted in a strange mixture of applause and stunned silence. Some spectators cheered quietly, while others simply sat in awe of the chain of events that had unfolded. A 3-year-old child had unknowingly sparked a revelation that seasoned investigators, forensic accountants, and attorneys had missed for months. Judge Whitfield rapped her gavel once more, her voice carrying a note of solemn admiration. Justice is sometimes delayed, but today it is not denied. Mr. Greer, you are free to go. Greer closed his eyes briefly before rising to his feet. Reporters clamored for statements as deputies escorted Halverson away in handcuffs. Amid the chaos, Emily felt a gentle tug at her sleeve. Harper was smiling up at her, her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in one small hand. Rex is happy now, she said softly. Emily bent to kiss her daughter's forehead, tears pricking her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. Rex is happy. We all are. Deputy Sloan approached with Rex at his side. The dog's calm amber eyes seemed to meet Harper's with a quiet understanding. Sloan crouched and offered a rare smile. "Looks like you and Rex saved the day," he said. Harper giggled, reaching out to pat Rex's head. "He told me," she said matter-of-factly, as if the entire courtroom had witnessed a perfectly ordinary conversation between a little girl and a dog. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, but Emily shielded her daughter from the glare. This was their moment, not the media's. She hugged Harper close, feeling the child's small heart beating steadily against her own. In the midst of the frenzy, Judge Whitfield quietly adjourned the court. "Let the record show," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber, "that truth has its own way of coming to light. Sometimes it even speaks through the innocent." As the crowd began to disperse, Emily looked down at Harper and whispered, "You were very brave today." Harper smiled, her eyes bright with unshakable certainty. "Rex was brave too," she said. "He always knows where the truth is hiding." Emily nodded, unable to argue. She glanced at Rex, who sat calmly beside Deputy Sloan, his tail giving a single, contented wag. The courtroom, once a stage for accusation and deception, now felt transformed, cleansed by the unlikely alliance of a loyal dog, a fearless child, and a truth too powerful to remain buried. The courthouse steps, usually a place of hurried exits and solemn goodbyes, transformed into a stage for celebration the morning after the verdict. The crisp autumn air carried the sharp scent of fallen leaves and the faint buzz of camera equipment. News vans lined the street like soldiers in formation, satellite dishes tilted toward the sky, ready to beam the incredible story to millions across the country. Emily Carter held Harper's hand tightly as they descended the wide stone staircase, flanked by Victor Lang on one side and Deputy Sloan with Rex on the other. Reporters swarmed, microphones outstretched, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of urgent questions. "Emily, how does it feel knowing your daughter uncovered the evidence that freed Thomas Greer?" "Harper, can you tell us what you said to Rex in the courtroom?" "Mr. Lang, will you be filing charges against the prosecution for misconduct?" Emily shielded Harper as best she could, offering polite but firm smiles. "We're just grateful for the truth," she said, her voice steady despite the swirl of flashing cameras. This was about justice, not attention. Harper, meanwhile, clung to her stuffed rabbit and smiled shyly at the crowd. Her pigtails bounced as she peeked at Rex, who sat calmly at Sloane's side, his amber eyes scanning the crowd with the same quiet vigilance that had uncovered the hidden ledgers. Inside the courthouse, Thomas Greer lingered in a private conference room with his legal team. For the first time in months, he breathed without the weight of false accusations pressing against his chest. The discovery of the ledgers had not only cleared his name, but revealed a web of deception, so intricate it left seasoned prosecutors stunned. Halverson's arrest sent shockwaves through the state's legal system, prompting internal reviews and promises of reform. Later that afternoon, Greer stepped outside to address the press. His suit, though modest, carried the dignity of a man who had walked through fire and emerged cleansed by truth. "I owe my freedom to many," he began, his voice catching as he glanced toward Emily and Harper. "To my attorney, who never stopped believing. To the investigators who followed the trail. And most of all, to a little girl who saw something none of us could. Harper, you reminded us all that innocence has a power we too often forget." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the image of Harper beaming up at the man she had unknowingly saved. Emily bent to whisper in her daughter's ear, and Harper giggled, burying her face against her mother's coat. Deputy Sloan stepped forward, his usual stoicism softened by the occasion. "And let's not forget Rex," he said, patting the German shepherd's head. "He did what he was trained to do. But sometimes it takes a child to notice what even the best dog can't point out on his own." The remark drew laughter and cheers. But beneath the levity lay an unspoken truth. the partnership between a child's unfiltered perception and a dog's unwavering loyalty had shifted the course of justice. That evening, news outlets across the nation replayed the story on a loop. Headlines ranged from toddler cracks high-stakes case to truth unleashed by canine and child. Social media platforms lit up with praise for Harper, who quickly became known as the little hero with the big heart. Within hours, hashtags like hashtag Harper and Rex and hashtag 2 little words trended worldwide. Emily's phone buzzed incessantly with interview requests, book offers, and even proposals for a film adaptation. She declined them all, determined to protect her daughter's childhood from the glare of celebrity. "Harper is just a little girl," she told one persistent producer. This was never about fame. Despite her efforts, the story continued to ripple outward. Schools across the country used Harper's experience as a lesson in civic engagement, teaching students that even the smallest voice can make a difference. Law enforcement agencies highlighted the case in canine training seminars, emphasizing the critical role of community awareness in uncovering hidden evidence. But for Emily and Harper, life gradually returned to something resembling normal. A week after the trial, they visited the local park where Harper loved to play on the swings. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their shoes as Harper ran ahead, her laughter carrying on the crisp breeze. "Mommy," she called, pointing to a squirrel darting across the path. "That squirrel is hiding something too." Emily laughed, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Maybe, sweetheart," she replied. "But I think we'll let the squirrel keep its secrets." At home that night, Emily tucked Harper into bed, the soft glow of a nightlight casting gentle shadows across the room. Harper clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, her eyelids already heavy with sleep. "Mommy," she murmured drowsily, "did we help Rex?" Emily brushed a stray curl from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, baby. You helped Rex, and you helped a lot of people." Harper smiled faintly, her words slurring as sleep overtook her. "Rex knows where the truth is hiding." Emily kissed her cheek, her own eyes misting. "Yes, he does. And so do you." Downstairs, Emily made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past weeks. She thought of the tense courtroom, the weight of injustice, and the miraculous chain of events that had begun with 2 innocent words. Box there. Words that had toppled lies, freed an innocent man, and reminded an entire community of the power of purity and instinct. Across town, Thomas Greer prepared to rebuild his life. Though vindicated, he knew the scars of false accusation would linger. Yet, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his freedom, but for the unexpected alliance of strangers who had fought for truth. He sent a handwritten note to Emily the next day. "Your daughter reminded me that goodness still shines, even in the darkest corners of the world. I will never forget her." Deputy Sloan and Rex, too, received their share of recognition. The police department awarded Rex a special commendation for extraordinary service, complete with a ceremonial medal that Harper insisted on polishing herself before the ceremony. Rex accepted the honor with his characteristic calm, his tail wagging gently as Harper stood proudly beside him. Weeks later, when the media frenzy had faded and life settled into quiet normalcy, Emily and Harper attended a small community gathering where neighbors celebrated the restoration of justice. Candles flickered in the twilight as people shared stories of courage and resilience. Victor Lang, ever the composed attorney, approached Emily with a rare softness in his eyes. "What your daughter did," he said, "will be remembered far beyond this town. She reminded us all that truth isn't always found in evidence or arguments. Sometimes it's spoken by those we least expect." Emily smiled, her gaze drifting toward Harper, who was giggling as Rex gently nudged her stuffed rabbit with his nose. "She just said what she saw," Emily replied. "The rest was up to all of us." Lang nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes that's all it takes, a spark. And in this case, it came from a 3-year-old and a dog. As the evening drew to a close, Emily watched Harper dance among the fireflies, her laughter mingling with the quiet murmur of neighbors and the distant bark of Rex. The darkness of the past months felt far away now, replaced by a gentle certainty. Justice, though fragile and often slow, could still triumph when innocence and instinct joined forces. The story of Harper and Rex would fade from headlines in time, but its lesson lingered in the hearts of all who witnessed it. Truth, Emily realized, does not always arrive with fanfare or legal precision. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a child pointing a tiny finger and whispering 2 simple words. Words powerful enough to topple lies and change lives forever.